All right, welcome back. I still can't believe the serendipity of talking about war driving, and that's the concert T-shirt for today. So it just means it was meant to be. So let's keep going here. Obviously, the problem. Oh my God! I just touched my face. Okay. The problem here is the signal transmission from the wireless device to the access point. If I were in the classroom, this is where I'd point up to the Aruba access point that's right there in the ceiling of our classroom. Show you what an access point looks like. Some have antennas, some don't. Like the ones in the classrooms don't have antennas; they're just built in. Also, they're so high up, there's less need for an antenna. But the idea is that an eavesdropper, somebody can kind of intercept transmission, and in fact, if you are in 468 and did the Wireshark exercise, you know how very easy it is to pull the packets out of the air and open them up so that if they're not encrypted, you can see everything that happens between point A and point B. And so 802.11 is the whole series of wireless standards. Remember, that's the numbering scheme from the IEEE. 802.11i has to do with wireless security. So let's talk about some of those standards. There are three. So in order to protect from point A to point B, I don't know why they kind of flipped the graphic here, but from point A to point B, there are three ways to encrypt, and the first two suck. Seriously, don't even use them. WEP, every access point knows how to do it. I can show a YouTube video later that can crack this in under 60 seconds. Just let that sink in for a second. If you're running Linux and some of the cracking tools that come with Kali Linux, less than 60 seconds. Boom. It's too easy. WPA was the follow-on. Nobody uses that anymore. Honestly, everybody uses WPA2 now. So the IEEE number for that is 802.11i, which is the same thing as WPA2. WPA2 is the more common term for this. I think later on I've got a slide. There is a WPA3 coming out, which we'll have to address. But for 802.11i, WPA2, that's protecting this signal, so it has to be configured on the access point as well as on the wireless client, which you have to do this anyway. You've had to do this to connect to EduRoam and the wireless network on campus. The Wi-Fi Alliances announced WPA3. I don't know of any companies that are using this yet or that are moving to it yet. I might pause the video here and do a quick check online just to get the latest and greatest information for you. But just some bits on features of the new WPA3. I just want you to know that there is such a thing as WPA3 on the exam, on the next exam, right? Exam number 3, not number 2. That initial connection to even an open wireless network is encrypted now, whereas otherwise, right now it's not. There was something called the crack attack that was pretty devastating back in 2017, although a new flavor of that has come back in 2019 and 2020. So this crack attack, which kind of inserts itself in that initial handshaking process when the two devices are syncing up for the first time. Is it going to completely fix it? No. Is it going to help? Yes. Okay, and then a stronger level of encryption. You don't have to memorize the number, but just, WPA3 is better, stronger encryption. Here, let me just pause for a second. I like to give you the latest information. There's probably stuff even newer than this, but Ars Technica is a great site. I mean, per the name, it's pretty technical, but it's a good go-to source for stuff like this. The headline is probably all you need to know at this point. Serious flaws leave WPA3 vulnerable to hacks that steal Wi-Fi passwords. The next generation standard was supposed to make password cracking a thing of the past. It won't. Again, My principle that I've taught for over 10 years is that wired is secure, wireless is inherently insecure. But the convenience of mobility is hard to fight. And again, this is a discussion of the business requirements, right? That's what drives using these unsecure or less secure networks. So this WPA2, which is primarily what everybody is using, all the large businesses across St. Louis are using WPA2 still. There are two modes. I call them enterprise and personal. Technically, it's the 802.1x mode, which is the enterprise mode, and the pre-shared key is the personal mode. So you can use WPA2 at home. In fact, I hope you are using this. If you don't have your wireless network locked down at this point at home, I don't know why you don't. You should be able to, unless you just don't have access to the configuration of your device at home, your wireless device at home, the router, whatever Linksys, Netgear, Belkin piece of crap device you're using at home. So you want to change the administrator password when you first get a wireless access point. You want to enable security and enable it for WPA2 security specifically. But you can use, and some configuration pages will call it PSK mode. And I always knew that PSK mode was just for like residential, simple setup. But I never knew what PSK stood for. It was back in the day. Previously shared key is all PSK mode stands for. So you have to manually put in the key on both ends. Now the problem with this is if you want to change the key, you have to manually change it on every single device. So if you've ever had to change this at home, it's kind of a pain in the ass. And obviously if you've got a large enterprise with thousands of devices, you can't go around changing the key manually for everybody. So you have to centralize this process by making all the users authenticate in order to get the new key, which is much more efficient, but requires more configuration is the big difference. So two alternatives. PSK for residences, 802.1x for organizations. Notice this is super tricky and just horrible. This 802. Just the numbers are so similar. 802.11i offers two authentication modes. So 802.11i is the same thing as WPA2. So WPA2 has two modes, one of which is enterprise mode, which has the number 802.1x. They just look very similar. So, man, just make some flashcards for the exam because I do need you to know these two numbers, and it's important to know the distinction between them. So here's another kind of cheat sheet, 802.11i, mode number 1 for home, mode number 2 for businesses. The big difference is you're using an authentication server for the second one. And I just touched my face again. Jesus. Sorry. So keep in mind, remember what we use for authentication on campus, right, is EduRoam. That's doing the authentication of the wireless network. Now, at your company where you work, maybe it's just Active Directory. Maybe it's a Radius server. It could be any number of things, but so 80, we'll have to talk about evil twin attacks here in a second. So WPA2 has to have something called an Extensible Authentication Protocol, or EAP, EAP, Extensible Authentication Protocol. Notice that you don't need EAP with a wired connection. We don't really care. We assume if you're able to physically plug a cable into a switch, that you're authorized to do that. Now, that may not be a safe assumption, right? But that is the assumption we use for wired networks, that you can just plug in and go. So that we're saying with UTP, with a wired connection, there's no need for security I think I did mention in the previous chapter that there is a new authentication standard for switches. I'd have to go back and look at the number, but keep in mind there is such a thing now. So this phrase, no need for security, is not quite right. What should this technological decision be based on? The business requirements. That's right. But on the wireless side, we certainly care. We care very much. There are different flavors of EAP. PEEP is Microsoft's implementation. LEAP was Cisco's early implementation, but they're all flavors of EAP. And so everybody has to use the same authentication protocol for this to work. Thank you, Ethan Creech, for reacting to my Microsoft Teams message. Do go ahead and try to log into Microsoft Teams, see how that's working for you. Yeah, we said this, PEEP and LEAP. Yeah. Here's the advantage of doing the wireless site survey on campus is you learn what it is that we're using. For example, 802.11 AC for the most part, N in some places, but AC for the most part. The type of encryption, WPA2, the type of authentication is AES if you do the wireless site survey. So I mentioned that this is it's kind of a pain in the ass to do it at home. It'd be impossible to do at work. So PSK mode, even though it's super easy to set up, is not appropriate for work. So moving on to the next section. Now we have to talk about two more wireless threats. So the first one was war driving. The second one is unprotected access points, i.e. they're not locked down and or they're not hardened. What do I mean by hardened? Not running the latest firmware, not patched, not kept up to date. Maybe the administrative password was never changed from the default. By the way, you can very easily find out the default from the manufacturer password for every access point out there. And then maybe in information security, I'll show you how to use the Shodan Internet of Things search engine to search for access points that are not locked down so that you can access them anywhere in the world. It's a frightening thing, this whole internet thing. But we'll get to that in a second when we get into Internet of Things towards the end. The problem with an unprotected access point so drive-by hackers gain access to the network without going through the site firewall. It might help to draw this out, but if you can visualize the following, if I were to draw the firewall on the board, that's kind of the front door of how you get into the network. But the access point is connected to a switch, inside your network. So if I pull up into the parking lot and connect to an access point, I'm not going in through the front door through the firewall. I'm going through a back door, as it were, right? And this is kind of what I do. I'll have to do this maybe later today. I frequently have to get in order to use the statistical software SPSS, I need a commuter license to use it remotely, and I have to be on the campus network to check out a copy of SPSS. So frequently what I do when I forget to do this is I'll drive to campus in my pajamas and just drive up close to Founders Hall, get a connection, get my SPSS license, and then drive away. Without ever going through, the front door or the firewall. So, am I a war driver? Yes. Am I a drive-by hacker? No, because I'm authorized to access the network. Hopefully. So the third threat is a rogue access point, i.e. you set up an access point because you know how, but you weren't authorized to do so. Now, this comes up in a couple of ways. Maybe somebody in IT does this. Maybe an end user does this. They decide they don't have wireless access where they are at work and they want it, or they want it in the break room or something, and so they just attach their own residential access point to your enterprise class network, which is a really crappy thing for somebody to do, but people will try to do this from time to time. Which again is just they're punching a hole in your network. Which, back to wireless management and network management in general, you want to have something that's scanning the network, looking for new wireless devices, wireless access points that get added to the network. Now, how can you tell this? Well, based on MAC address. Because remember from an earlier homework assignment, the first 6 digits of a MAC address, the physical address, is assigned to a manufacturer. And in fact, based on the sequence of the MAC address, you can tell what type of device it is. So that if a new wireless access point comes online and you're scanning for certain ranges of addresses, it should pick it up and tell you that a new one's on the network, so you can do something about it. And then you can use a wireless site survey tool like Xeris to go find where it is. But we haven't talked about the biggest problem. The biggest problem of all, which I will get to in the 3rd video. Pause for dramatic effect.